I come from a research institution in Iceland that has been conducting research on young people for years, and our database reaches back to the year 1992. So we have a huge database about youth in Iceland, and we have been trying to use this data in order to reduce substance use amongst adolescents and children in our country. And I would like to show you how we have been doing. If you look at the blue line, we can see that in the year 1998, 42% of 15 and 16-year-old adolescents in Iceland had become drunk for the past 30 days before the data collection. In the year 2016, this is down to 5%. The red line is about smoking, daily smoking. And 23% of adolescents this age smoked cigarettes in 1998. Today that's 3%. And those who had tried cannabis were 17%, and today that's 7%. Saulius, you're so strong. He has been exercising, obviously. For a small comparison, if we just look at alcohol use, we see here the figures in Iceland, the red line from 95 to 2011 from the SBAT studies, and from several other countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Czech, etc. And we can see that the use of alcohol has not changed that much in these countries. If we look at Finland and Sweden, the blue lines, we can see that adolescents in these countries are using less alcohol than in '95, and many of the measures taken in Finland and Sweden have been similar to the ones in Iceland. England has not changed, they are on top. And here we see the trend in Lithuania, alcohol use past 30 days. And from these figures we can see that it has not changed at all since 1995. Many say that it must be easy for us to change the behavior of children because the island is so small and isolated. But we then normally point out another small states and small islands. If we look at the blue line here in Liechtenstein and alcohol use, the blue line in Malta, which is also an island, of course, they have huge problems with substance use amongst adolescents. But we have had some good results in Iceland in all categories. And today, actually last week, we had 3 new cities joining the Youth in Europe program, so we now have 35 cities all over Europe who are working according to the same methodology as we have been using. And in Lithuania, Vilnius has been a part of this program from the very start in 2006, and also Kaunas and Klaipėda. Now, people sometimes ask us, why do you put so much effort in youth research? In the field of medicine, engineering, tourism, fisheries, pharmaceutical, you never issue a new product without doing thorough research. You don't build a bridge without checking the foundation. You don't issue a new drug for a headache without testing. So why, we always answer, why don't we use research in the same manner in order to make sure that our children are feeling as well as possible? In these data collections that we do every year, we have very thorough questionnaires. and we ask about more or less everything that is important in the lives of children. This is at least every second year, normally every year, since 1992. And what makes our work special is that we always, when we collect data, deliberately take our job into two categories, scientific and practical. We take the data and we publish peer-reviewed articles. We have published between 70 and 80 for the past 10 years in international journals. So whenever we suggest a practical application in a municipality or a city, that is always based on scientific arguments. The other part, the practical role, is that we collect data normally in February in our schools in Iceland. Within 2 months, almost all the municipalities and about 80% of the schools have got practical reports about the situation of the children in the municipalities. So the people working with children, they know immediately if something is wrong in that school or that municipality, or if something needs to be fixed. And these are the slides that Saulius borrowed from me, and I stole it from somebody else. But this is the way we used to work like this. We used to be researchers, publish papers, without any connection at all with policymakers and practitioners. And unfortunately, many scientists are working like this today. They don't care about practical applications of their work, just want to make a new paper. So this is how we're doing it today. Within 2 months of each data collection, we give out the reports, and we can show the municipalities, this is fine, here we need to fix something, etc. And it is important to measure frequently. We cannot measure every 5 years, because the lives of adolescents change very fast. And so we measure every year, we try that. And also, if you would be presenting figures about something that happened 2 years ago, or even just last winter, nobody is interested. We often say that the data that we hand out to the municipalities, the information, it has to be new, it has to be fresh, just like vegetables. I always say the same thing. Vegetables have to be fresh, and the same goes with this data, otherwise nobody is interested. And it is children's rights to say how they feel and what they want, and it is our obligation to act accordingly. Now, what did we learn? As I said, we started collecting this data in 1992, and we could see until 1998 that there was a constant rise in the use of alcohol, cannabis, and cigarettes. So at that time, in around 98, the data was analyzed very deeply, and we tried to establish risk and protective factors from the data. What was connecting children who started to use drugs, and what was connecting those who did not. And in our settings, in our country, we found out that there were 4 main categories: the family factors, the peer group, the general well-being of the children, and also it was important what our children were doing outside of school and outside of home. And when we looked deeper into this, we could see that it was the time spent with parents was important, support, monitoring, control, caring and warmth. All these were preventive factors if they were scoring high. We could see the positive and negative factors of the peer groups, hanging out late with friends in the mall was a risk factor, etc. And we could teach parents that. We could see that the better our children were feeling inside and outside of school and home, of course, the less likely they were to use drugs. And we could also see that participation in organized youth work and sports was a preventive factor. We have analyzed this also here in Lithuania, and the same factors apply for the family factors, the peer group effect, and the general well-being. However, the extracurricular activities factor in Lithuania does not score so high as a preventive factor. So there is an opportunity. So the core of the work in Iceland has been using evidence, community approach, and keeping the constant dialogue between research, policy, and practice. In '98, the government and the city of Reykjavik, they started what they called a program called Drug-Free Iceland, a totally new methodology, because what had been done before was not working. We had been teaching children to say no, to take responsibility of their own lives, but that was not working. So the aim of Drug-Free Iceland, it started out as a 5-year project, but then it just continued and hasn't stopped. The aim was to change the actual behavior and the lifestyle environment of the children so they would be in lesser risk of starting to use drugs. And the focus is on primary prevention in Drug-Free Iceland. Of course, we have secondary and tertiary, but the focus is on primary. And I've said before that in Iceland we have been closing down treatment centers for children because there are less and less children who need treatment. Now, the findings, what I showed you with the circles, how were they used? Also they were divided up into 2 categories, the communities on one side and the government on the other side. The communities in Iceland, they use research as a basis in their actions. We could see that the parental factors were very important, so parental organizations were formed and strengthened. We supported extracurricular activities and sports. NGOs formed cooperative groups against drugs, etc., on a municipal level. The government raised the age limits to buy alcohol, and there is a total advertising ban on tobacco and alcohol. There is restricted access. We only sell alcohol in state-run shops. And we could see it was a risk factor to hang out late with friends, so the government set laws on how late young people could stay outside. And there is also a visibility ban on tobacco and alcohol. You can buy tobacco in stores, but you can never see tobacco. You always have to ask, do you sell tobacco? Because it is illegal to have tobacco on display, like this, for example. You never see a packet of cigarettes in a store in Iceland. Also, peanuts and gin, you don't see this in the stores. It is simply illegal. And there is also no beer, of course, sold in stores. You also have to go to the state-run shops to buy beer. One other thing that we saw was important, and the same goes with Lithuania. It was important to work on a community level because, well, we never work in a whole country. We always work in the different communities. The situation can be different in Vilnius and Klaipėda, so things have to be worked on differently. So focus on the close community, and because the average figures for a country like Lithuania doesn't tell you the situation in Kaunas. You have to know, you have to do the research in Kaunas to know how the situation is there. So what has changed through the years? We have changed the community. There is increased participation in organized leisure time activities. Parents are spending half more time with their children than before because now parents know how important that is. Less late outside hours, children are coming home earlier in the night. Increased parental monitoring, etc. We have strengthened all the preventive factors and weakened the risk factors. And at the same time, this has been happening. Substance use has been going down dramatically. In 2005, the program I mentioned, Youth in Europe, started, and Lithuania has been in a part of it from the start. And yes, as I say, 35 cities in Europe are now working in the same manner. So finally, the to-do list in a municipality is you need to map the situation in the local conditions. National figures, they don't tell everything about your community. You need to assess the risk and protective factors and address these. It is not enough to know what is risk and what is protective. You have to address it. Form the local networks, because everybody has to work together. No one institution can do this. You have to give out immediate information to the people who are working on children's well-being, and measure at least every second year, preferably every year. It's easy as that. Thank you.